Our candidates for this evening are John Helmrich and Jonathan Phillips. John. Okay, very good. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization formed in 1920 when women first earned the right to vote. We encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League is open to all citizens of voting age. However, we do not support or oppose candidates, but we do take positions on policies that we have studied both at a local, state, and national level. Our goal for tonight's program is to help you become better acquainted with the candidates seeking to represent you as Township Supervisor. They will have an opportunity to express their viewpoints, answer your questions, and share some of the reasons why they are running for office. At this point in time, then, I'd like to read the rules for you. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening statement, and then a question and answer period will follow. Again, 2 minutes for response per candidate, and then 2-minute closing statements. The timekeeper tonight is Kathy Brockington. You'll see a stop, so she will indicate. And when you see the stop sign, what should you do? All right, very good. Okay. Yeah, right. If they can obey that, then that says something, right? Anyway, the order is going to be alphabetical, and so we'll start with John for the first question, but the second question then will be first answered by Jonathan. The audience may direct your questions to either of the candidates. However, tonight we have an open mic, so we're going to ask you to come forward to the mic here. Please state your name and then pose your question. Even if you say Jonathan, both candidates will be able to respond to that question. If, however, you do not feel comfortable coming to the mic, please raise your hand and a league member will get your question and then I will read it from the dais. No cameras or taping equipment are to be used, and as a courtesy to the candidates, would you check now your cell phones and make sure that they are off. While you're doing that, this forum will be programmed. It's being taped and it will be available for viewing on www.LWV, meaning League of Women Voters Holland.org. Given that, gentlemen, we are ready to begin. John, would you begin with your 2-minute statement, please?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the League, the high school, for having us here, and especially thank all of you for showing up this evening. Is the sound okay? Yeah. Okay, great. I'm John Helmrich, and I'm running for Saugatuck Township Supervisor. And I'm doing that because I want to offer and bring my leadership, vision, and experience to work for the people of the township and work with and for the township government. My goal is to create a more proactive township board that gets in front of issues and challenges with a strategic plan to solve them together rather than waiting for them to arise on their own. And we do that through three main areas. 1 is economic development, 2 is regional cooperation, and 3 is land stewardship. Economic development includes many things, such as attracting more homes to be built in the township for young families and making things more affordable for them. It also includes business economic development, keeping the businesses we have in the township happy and successful, and doing more to attract new ones that'll come in and create more jobs and increase our tax basis. And it also extends to the issue of universal internet and Wi-Fi access for every home and residence in Saugatuck Township. Regional cooperation. This is an area where the 3 communities here have excelled quite well over the past few years. If you look at the success of our library, our fire department, our great school district, and we can do more of that. Thirdly, land stewardship, and this includes realizing that we have to be the stewards and take care of important resources in the township. We have the Kalamazoo River, the harbor, which touches the township in 2 places, the lake shore, and the entrances to the city, the land around the entrances off of the highway, which I think needs some attention from us. I would like to offer more later. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jonathan.
I'm John Phillips. I'm running for Saugatuck Supervisor. For the last 4 years, I have proudly served you, working with other members of the board to restore fiscal health for our township. The board has worked superbly together to be good stewards of the resources of the residents by the township. Among my votes were those to save taxpayer dollars in ambulance service, avoid litigation, and make general improvements to the beauty of our township. I will work on improving public safety, improve internet accessibility, and partnering with our neighbors, governments, to preserve our beautiful township are among the goals for the future. By focusing on serving the township, we will ensure the best services of any small town offers. This includes recycling, fire, police protection, streetlights, interurban services, and most importantly, an environment of cooperation and working together. I would greatly appreciate your vote on November 8th.
Thank you. You've now heard from the candidates. Now it's your time to speak. So if you will please come to the mic and pose your question, please remember to state your name. And John, we will begin with you. John. You, John. John number one.
If we
John.
both answer at the same time, it'll go much quicker.
I'm Larry Dickey, resident of the township. You've both stated what you hope to see happen in the future, but just for the benefit of the people in the audience, for those of us who don't go to the township meetings as often as both of you do, can you just describe, one of you maybe can do this and the other can answer the other part of the question, but can you just describe what does the supervisor do? What is the supervisor's role? And do you see that changing in any way under your leadership? Thanks.
Sure, I actually have here the statutory duties of a supervisor. The main one, I'll need my glasses for this, moderates board and annual meetings, township's legal agent, develops the township budget. And this is something where I know I can bring a lot to the fore because my entire career in the business and nonprofit world has been all about budgets. Managing budgets, creating budgets, balancing budgets, looking at new revenue streams. Fiscal responsibility has been the core of my business and my life for over 30 years now. I would also like to see this discussed with the other members of the board and township staff, but I think the township supervisor can and should take a very prominent role when I talk about economic development. There has been talk for years in the Tri-Community Master Plan, which was recently revised, and other ways, other groups trying to bring an economic development committee or authority to the three communities. And I would be very willing to take a leadership role in that and work with the other members of the board, because there's so much more we can do with agencies like the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the Right Place based in Grand Rapids. I know these people, I've worked with these people. There are grants out there that we can bring to the township to help pay for things. And I think that would be my number one goal, would be to instill more of that economic development leadership into the role of the supervisor, as the supervisor is the leader of the township board.
Jonathan, what would you add to that?
I don't disagree with what John said. Maybe for the partial part that the supervisor handles, our economic growth, I believe as a board we do that as a group together. It works coherently. And we rely greatly on the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board, and our parks. And they have a lot to do with what we decide as we grow. We take their input, bring it together. The main part I think that the supervisor does is he kind of dictates or puts out people in the right positions to handle those things. I mean, since I've been in office, I know our general fund has grown over 405% from what it was when I started. So I think we've done a pretty good job of increasing growth.
Thank you. Second question?
My name is Kirk Harrier, a resident of Saugatuck Township. Allegan County records show only 741 Saugatuck Township residents are signed up to use the curbside recycling program out of the total 1,841 residential parcels in Saugatuck Township. Many of the subdivisions in Saugatuck Township have already negotiated combined trash and recycling services with a private hauler and realized significant savings. If the mandatory $36 recycling surcharge is implemented, these subdivisions, as well as the majority of households not using the Allegan County curbside program, will be forced to pay for a service they don't use. The majority of taxpayers would be subsidizing the minority percentage of taxpayers using the service. Do you feel this is a fair and equitable program for all township residents? And if not, do you have a solution?
Jonathan, we begin with you.
No, it's not. And it's kind of set up to fail, unfortunately. With the way Kent County and the recycling fees that are going up and the uncertainty in this election with fuel prices possibly rising, it maybe has a lifespan of 2 years. And most likely, I think we can come up with a much better solution to solve it, whether we go to a single trash hauler, which I'm very much in favor of, and I think most of our constituents are. I believe that's more the route we need to start looking, and I think that in the end, it'll benefit all of us. We'll see lower trash costs and cheaper recycling.
John?
I think we agree on this issue very much. Since March, I've been talking to residents in person and getting emails about their biggest issues, and this has definitely been in the top 3. There's a lot of us in the township that do not understand how it's possible that the township had a vote against this recycling tax, and it is a tax because it's mandatory. They voted it down, and then the township board went to the county, and for some reason, some machination of government work that I don't quite understand, they were able to reverse that. Now I'm hearing that this will be a mandatory tax that everyone has to pay. Currently, you can opt out of the charge for recycling. That's to have this county do your recycling every 2 weeks. I think the vast majority of township residents have, well, we all have private trash hauling, and most of those haulers offer recycling. And when I learned about this about 3 years ago, just on the off chance in visiting the township office, I said, well, please take me off that tax. And it was about $28, I think. You could opt out. The new tax, you can't do that. It's mandatory. It's like $37, and it's to fund a failing system run by the county. That should not be done on the back of the township residents and township voters. I too have favored for a long time and have spoken at 2 or 3 different township board meetings on the need for single hauler for a variety of reasons, from environmental reasons to economic reasons to common sense. The 2 cities have a single hauler, and I would like to see us revisit that, but I think the first step to get back the support and the confidence of our electorate is to deal with this recycling tax issue that, again, I don't understand how the board was able to work with the county and reverse the vote of the people.
Thank you.
Another question. Please.
I'm Elliot Stern. My wife Kathy and I live in the township out in the frontier. And one of the issues we have is internet access, and both of you touched on that. And I'm curious to know if there's funding for that and what, if any, plans there are currently to get that going, because we're dying out there. Both, we work out of the house, we both have businesses, and internet access is incredibly valuable, especially high speed, not the DSL that Frontier offers, that we only have. So if you have any answers for that, I would sure appreciate knowing what, what's coming down the street. Thanks.
John?
Yes, this again, something we both agree on, and I know John will probably talk about the fact that the township board set up a committee that I think John's in charge of to look into this issue. That was one of the top 3 issues I'm hearing about too. And I want to underscore my belief that access to the internet in this day and age is really, it's a civil right issue. It's an education issue. You can't have students that have homework online going home to a home that they can't get access to this. And there are myriad ways to do this. Laketown Township recently tried to do a millage to cover what would be necessary to solve the problem. We could work directly with companies and internet providers to work something out. And there are grants. There are federal grants out there that provide the funds to increase this access capability to the internet for everyone in an area. It's just sort of ludicrous. I mean, I know the township's big, but we live in this area in West Michigan. You can't live your life anymore without access to the internet. So I think it may even be something, from what I've heard, that might be solved before the next board takes its seat. I'm sure John will fill us in on an update on that. I'm happy that the board finally took a look at this, but it wasn't until probably the last 6 months or so. But it's a very, very important issue, and I'm confident with the support that we already have from us that we'll find a suitable solution. But I think the sooner the better for everybody. Thank you.
Jonathan?
I do agree with John on that. The importance of the internet is great. I have 2 boys. When you get into 7th grade, you have a Chromebook that they're issued, and that is how they get their homework and how they do their homework. So I understand the importance of the internet. I'm also self-employed, so I do some work from home, and it is important to have. I do know that there are 2 major fiber optic lines that run up the 96 highway there, and then there's one on 58th Street. The one on 58th Street, I understand, is privately owned. And in order to basically, what we have to do is get in contact with the 2 entities that have these. Every school typically has fiber optics run to it already. It's already in the system. But we do have the ability to tap off, especially for our township towards the Potawatomi area. It's a matter of basically we got to get in touch and get quotes. What does it take to lay the line? How much is it going to cost us? And put it out there. And then basically we're kind of going to end up with the same thing Laketown had. We're going to end up putting it to a vote because the cost is not cheap. We know that. But we also do know that the DSL lines that Frontier currently has is limited. You can only get so much data through copper.
Thank you. Push the white button. There you go.
Okay. I'm short. I'm Judith Schneider. I do live in the township. And most of you know that I came here from Chicago. And within my lifetime, whole areas of city that used to be rural or country-ish or undeveloped became developed. And I moved here because I liked Saugatuck, and I kind of liked the small town. Therefore, I would like both of you to address the issue of development, sprawl, keeping development within reasonable limits without keeping I'm not against it, and the environment. And of course, making development affordable for those of us who live here and not just people who want big houses or whatever. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, we begin with you.
I guess I feel that in our rural areas, we've set a pretty good precedence with only the 2.5 acre parcels is as much as you can really, that's the smallest you can go. As far as subdivisions, right now we have enough subdivisions sitting empty with no houses on them, roads going to them. We have a lot of room we can take growth. And I think, I agree with John here on promoting some of these areas and getting them to prosper. And I think with our local realtors, we can probably achieve a lot of that and maybe a little help cleaning them up because some of them have sat a while and they do look rough.
John?
Yeah, just to the point of growth, it's kind of interesting to note that between 1990 and 2012, the population of Saugatuck Township grew by 56%, clearly leading the 3-community area. And we're at a point now where 56% of the homes in the tri-community area are in the township. But as John mentioned, we do have tracts that are undeveloped. We have subdivisions that have been approved and created that don't have housing in them. And I think it's critical to attract builders to provide housing to satisfy a very broad swath of people. As I said before, we need housing for young families. We need to get young people with families to live in the township to help keep feeding our great school system. That's a major, major concern I have. On the other end of the scale, we also need housing, affordable housing for senior citizens. Not all the seniors that live in the township or in the tri-community area, are rich people that can afford these retirement homes. We have a mixture of things. I want to see us serve all those constituencies. I'm very much for measured and appropriate growth. I'm for retail growth. I'm totally against big boxes and chains in the township, but we have empty buildings that could be light manufacturing. We could promote more business. We could also tie it into something I kind of mentioned in the beginning, and that's this issue of, for lack of a better word, beautifying or at least improving the view of Blue Star Highway. I mentioned the two entrances to the area. You get off the freeway, both of them are in the township. It's not a very pretty sight. So I think there are things we can do on that front too, and that's part of the kind of economic development that I very much favor. And I think, again, we can be more proactive. Yes, we work together, but we kind of need a leader to set a plan and work these things out and then divvy up the responsibility. Who's going to look after this state grant? Who's going to talk to that potential builder? I've often talked about, I went to all of the Edgewater Resources presentations at the brewery on potential plans for the Tower Marine site, and I'll tell you more about that later.
Please?
Hi, I'm Larry Sharp, and live in the Indian Point area in the township. We recently went to a presentation on the harbor, presentation that talked about future plans, possibilities, how to remediate the siltation in the harbor, how to prevent further siltation. And I know that the township has not been a full participant in those discussions or in the financing of those efforts, and I really think it's important that the township be part of that. I've heard people say, well, it doesn't affect I live in the township, that doesn't affect me, but I know it affects my property value if we don't have waterfront, even though I live in the township. So I think it's a really critical issue, and has been for a long time. It's being remediated right now because of high water, but it's going to be there when the water goes back down again.
And your question is?
How can we get the township involved?
Well, you're asking two of the right people to ask that question to. I've spent the last 4 years representing the township on the Harbor Authority. One of my goals was to move that discussion forward, to get the township engaged. They have a non-voting representative, but if you don't vote, if you don't have a seat at the table to vote, it's sort of meaningless. About 2 years ago, I started pushing this notion more. We set up a subcommittee of the Harbor Authority. We asked John to serve on it. John had been on the Harbor Committee, which existed before the authority was actually set up. And I think we both believe very strongly that the township needs to be a part of the Harbor Authority. I mentioned earlier, the harbor itself, by the current definition, in two places, both upstream and at the river, is in Saugatuck Township. You mentioned the aspect that is so important. The harbor is such a lifeblood of our boating and tourism industry. It provides jobs. If we don't take care of it and plan accordingly, we all suffer, including people in the township that might have jobs there. John used to work at Tower Marine, so he's a perfect example of that. What I don't understand is we got to this point, we got the Harbor Authority to agree that the township could join the authority as a full voting member, two representatives like the two cities, and not be responsible for a single penny, a single dime that they may have spent in the past setting the authority up or for whatever other reason. It was risk-free to join. We had 2 public hearings at the Township Board. Many people in this room were there and spoke up in favor. In fact, the ratio was like 10-to-1, people speaking in favor of joining versus not. And 2 months in a row, After 2 public hearings, the current board voted by a narrow vote, 3-2, but they voted to table this matter. It's been tabled indefinitely. Had I been on the board at that point, it would have been 3-2 the other way.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I agree with 90% of what John said. So I'll take it. Yes, it was tabled. Was it tabled indefinitely? No, I don't think so. I think that one of the issues that came up was we had drafted our contract agreement to the cities, and we asked the cities to review our contract agreement, and they decided at that point that they didn't want to spend the money to have our contract reviewed. So we were kind of forced to table it at that point. Do I think it's a dead subject? No, not one bit. Am I passionate about the river? You bet. I've been boating on it since I was a kid. I pretty much know the river inside and out. I understand what it's about. I think we had a great thing set up there, and I'm not sure why it stopped, but I think we can make it move ahead. I don't think that's an issue. I think with a little cooperation from Douglas and Saugatuck and some talking, we can get through it, and we can figure it out. I don't know that the township, it's very difficult to get some of the rural area to agree to spend money on it, and that's why we did it as a $0 contract. Most of the, yes, John's right, the beginning and the end. At the beginning, there's not many people there right now. At the end, yes, there is a lot of people that are on that. You have a few in the audience. I'm sure you could find some that agree with you, some that do not. At that point, I think we did the best effort we could to get it moved through. Should it be brought up again? Yes.
My name is Richard Donovan. I am a township resident. First, thank you both for your past service and for your interest in this position. I'm glad to hear that you agree on many things, but it would help me as a voter if you could explain where you disagree. So maybe if you could each identify 2 or 3 points where you think your positions differ and why.
We begin with you, Jonathan.
I guess my big one is property ownership. I feel that as a property owner, that you have rights. You have rights to your property. I don't think anybody should decide what those rights are. You have, as long as you abide by ordinances and zoning laws as they're dictated, those are your rights as an individual. I also feel that, John's pushing the side where he would like to see cheaper housing. I understand that. But there's a lot of areas within the cities too where that's been offered right now, and it's on the table, especially in Douglas. I guess I'm waiting to see what happens there.
John?
I don't think we have a disagreement on the importance of property owners' rights, for one. And when I was thinking about the answer to this question, I kind of come up with one, and I think it's less of a disagreement, but just a different approach. And I go back to the fact that I really do believe we would be better served by a more proactive board led by a proactive supervisor in a number of ways. I've mentioned before, but the economic development is definitely number one for me. Again, I don't think it's a disagreement, but John said earlier that kind of said the board's already doing this, and I haven't seen that. I think there's a lot more we could do, and I think we could map out a plan. We could almost make an agreement with ourselves that we're going to take these steps or explore these opportunities and make them happen.
Thank you.
Respond to that?
No. But thank you for asking.
I too would like to thank you both for the work that you've done. I do value both of you for that. I think one of the things I'm interested in most here is the fact that the supervisor role is different than serving as a trustee because it's a leadership position. And so my question is twofold. One, can you give me examples of where you have been a leader and what you accomplished in that leadership role? And two, what is your philosophy of leadership? How do you envision leadership happening?
We begin with John.
Thank you. One thing that comes to mind is the work I was able to do about 2 years ago. I took a very strong leadership role in working with the state, with the Michigan State Housing and Development Authority, and brought a program to the community called My Place, which was the placemaking initiative. I kind of worked on this. A lot of this I did on my own, but part of what I did, and I think this illustrates my leadership capabilities, I was able to bring over 60 people to the CVB where we met. We had 6 meetings on Wednesdays, 6 two-hour meetings over 6 consecutive Wednesdays right at the beginning of the season to not interfere with the high season in the summer. We had residents, we had business owners, and I'm most proud that we had some elected and appointed government officials from 7 regional communities. We had people from as far south as Ganges, we had Fenville, and this group came together, and some of them came every week, and some only came to a couple of the sessions. The point is, they wanted to hear about placemaking. They wanted to hear opportunities offered by the state. And I was very proud to be the leader of that initiative and get these people here. And then we did some follow-up strategy sessions. Again, did it keep going? No. Why not? Because a leader didn't come out of that group to keep it going. You have to have a leader. And I like to say I lead by example, but I'm also a big team leader. My entire corporate life was being parts of corporate management teams and then managing my own teams. And again, you lead by example, you keep an open mind, you listen to people, and you set goals and hopefully achieve all of them, some of them, it depends on the situation. But I think I've shown leadership many times through my career and even in the 12 years plus that I've been active in the Saugatuck area. Thank you.
Jonathan?
I work in a company right now where it's me and pretty much one other gentleman that we do about $4 million a year. And we use pretty much for our labor, a 70 times 7 group. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. But it's basically we take inmates and we use them and help rehabilitate them. And it takes a lot of leadership to keep them on the straight and narrow. It's not an easy thing. But it's been quite joyful in my heart to do it. I also feel that as far as being proactive, right now, if you take a look at the Flint crisis and you start looking at the situation there, our capital investment fund finally has money in it after 4 years. Before we had about $10,000. Now we've got about 50. But that money needs to increase. And the reason that money needs to increase is we are going to have to fix our water pipes. It's coming. And we had no money put away for anything if it happened catastrophically. If something broke, we were stuck 4 years ago. We finally have money to start making improvements to fix these things. We have money now for our parks. We're starting to be able to do things. And I think that's being proactive, listening to our people.
Thank you.
I'm Stacy Aldrich from Saugatuck Township. There's been talk about joining the Saugatuck Douglas Police Force. How do you feel about that?
We begin with Jonathan.
I think it's incredibly important. I think it's much needed. We just had a situation this last week where the fire department showed up to a meth lab right down the road from my house. I think it's quite important. The response time, thank goodness, Douglas and Saugatuck Police decided to come. There's times they can't. There's times they don't have to. It took the state police an hour and a half to get there. It's so important to us, and it's so important to our first responders who show up on these scenes, and we need that collaboration, I believe. I think it's very important to me, and I'm very for joining.
John?
That's the number one issue I keep referring to. I've been keeping a tally of things people have shared with me and asked me about. And most of the people I'm hearing from have sort of been asking me, do I know, what is the problem here? Why is this becoming an issue all of a sudden? The way things are structured now, Saugatuck Township is, we get law enforcement from Allegan County Sheriff's Department and occasionally from the state troopers who are actually based here, have a substation here, as you all know, next door to the township office. So I think that's part of it. The issue is Is there really a problem? Let's get more information. But then let's look at all the different solutions. I applaud the fact that a committee's been set up between the three communities to study options. I think the key word here is options. I'm not in favor of racing in to join and pay a third of $1.5 million budget a year of police force with 8 people that some people think is overstaffed for the 2 communities it already serves. Let's study that more. As I said, there are options. We could get a dedicated police deputy that is assigned to the township from Allegan County Sheriff's Department for a fraction of the cost of paying our way to the whole police department. So I think we need to be prudent and cautious. Again, let's really get the facts and analyze, is there something wrong that needs to be fixed? The only time I've ever had to call the police, and it was really to report something, it wasn't to say, I need you, I just was reporting something. Within 2 minutes, a state trooper was at my house. I was like, I don't want to waste your time in being here. But he's like, well, no, we have to report this, it's a serious offense, blah, blah, blah. It was a property issue. A theft issue, I should say. But my point is, let's be cautious, let's be fiscally reasonable and responsible. I don't support a rush into anything to commit this kind of money to a new venture when there are other things we've been looking at that might need addressing first. And again, what I'm hearing from the people, and I think ultimately this would have to go to a public vote, I'm not hearing a big outcry that we need to do this. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe that's not true. Maybe the people that want to join the police force have been quieter, but let's really study this carefully.
Patty Burkholz from Saugatuck Township. I'm going to disagree with my friend and neighbor, the city manager of Saugatuck, on an issue. And full disclosure, I was the one who started curbside recycling in Saugatuck Township when I was on the Saugatuck Township Board more years ago than I'm going to care to tell you about. And the reason I'm supporting the continuation is because of another issue that we have that nobody likes to talk about around here. We live on the most contaminated river in the United States. The most contaminated by the federal government. We also have a lot of contaminated areas within the township. We had some people many years ago, some of them ignorantly, some of them just did it because they wanted to get rid of it, dump things like different chemicals from different processing plants, chemicals from a business that did dry cleaning. I'm not going to point fingers. Farmers who dumped chemicals all over Saugatuck Township. We have many places where the water is so contaminated it will probably never be usable to put in a well. We also have a dump that's one of the biggest dump sites, the most contaminated in the state of Michigan. And because of that, we started the recycling program to get rid of things like batteries, like motor oil, like scrap tire, like household hazardous waste, those kinds of things that are not part of a regular pickup from somebody who comes to your door or to your driveway every week. But by being part of the county recycling program, we can be part of that for $35 a year. Now, it does mean that you usually have to drive it to a drop-off place, but it doesn't mean that you have to pay $50, $100 as you would if you went into some of the cities around here to get rid of those things, or worse, if you dump them on the properties that are quote-unquote out in the country. Who cares? It doesn't matter. I was able to get the last project done through the state of Michigan my last year in the Michigan Senate to get a pipeline underneath the interstate over to some property across the interstate where a woman, I'm not going to name names, who we all loved, she's no longer with us, had developed cancer, and the cancer problems were coming from her shower. She had to go in to Holland every day and take a shower at her mother's home. She died about a year after we got those pipelines through to her house. But she couldn't even take a shower, let alone drink the water in her own home, because the water that was coming from her household well was so bad. So I encourage you to continue to support that program for a reasonable amount of money, which helps people get rid of those things in a short time and a short distance away, and not throw them out, and literally that's what people were doing, was throwing them out the window. They'd go out in the country, on a country road, and just throw them. And because of that, we have a lot of contaminated sites where people never will be able to get water.
Do you have a question?
Yes. What do you think about that?
She kind of threw you under the bus, John.
Is it me first?
We begin with John.
Remember the song, Where Do I Begin? Well, first of all, I want to thank you and applaud all the efforts you've put in over many, many years, and we've worked on things together. I'm well aware that the largest Superfund site in the United States is upriver on the Kalamazoo River. We deal with the waste and the runoff and the silt and the chemicals from that every single day just by living here, even if we don't swim in Kalamazoo Lake Harbor. I agree with all the essence of what you're saying. And I think, hazardous waste disposal is terrible, and people that do it in the way you discussed that some have, they should be prosecuted. That should be illegal. That's hurting everybody. I guess the part I'm not quite sure, but I'm open to studying more, is I'm not sure what the incentive is if you say we can drive our hazardous waste to these places. If I guess you're saying by paying for the recycling, then we're allowed to go there. Well, I'm sorry, I think those hazardous waste depository sites should be open to anyone who shows up with hazardous waste. I don't think they should have to prove that they paid a $37 tax. I think probably what needs to be done at the county and the local level is kind of separate these two notions. Recycling is one thing, and recycling rates, are way up because there's so many private providers recycle now. And I'm talking about the standard plastics and papers and tin cans aspects. So I think if the real modus operandi of this recycling tax is to fund hazardous waste management, let's call it what it is. I might have a different position if we're faced with, for $28 a month, we have a system for disposing of hazardous waste. Fine, let's call it what it is. To me, that's not recycling. Recycling is a different issue. So, I think we agree with the initial outcome. I'd like to learn more about the steps and the processes, because that was new information to me, and I thank you for sharing it.
Jonathan?
Right now, if you can take a tour of almost any garbage company. You could go up to Chef right now, and if you take a tour, it's actually very impressive what they do. They actually take all your garbage bags and open them. And they actually have people separating the garbage right there for recyclables and stuff, because they get money out of it. They do also offer, you can drop your batteries off there. You can drop off your hazardous waste. You can take your drain oil to them now, which is a pretty neat option to be able to do that. Batteries now, an average car battery is worth about $12 recycling fee. So if you bring it in, you get $12 for that bad battery. So some people take them in to have them recycled. Some people take them right back to AutoZone and drop it off because they get the $12. I guess, I don't think we'd ever drop it. I don't think that would be an issue. I think it's become a way of life for a lot of us now. We all really want to recycle, and our kids are definitely taught it in the schools. So I guess the deal is the program, the concern with the program at Allegan County is there going to be enough money in 2 years to keep it going? Or are they going to come back to us and go, guess what? You got to pull money out of your general fund to cover the cost that isn't there.
Next.
Hi, I'm James Cook, local and involved in our township for 12 years. Are there any particular points in the tri-community plan that you particularly like or dislike? And do you support the ideas behind the plan in general?
We begin with Jonathan.
I think I like almost all the plans that are pretty much in there. It was all put together jointly, so it's very comfortable. We were always told that it's a great guideline for us to help in economic development.
John?
I'm glad the tri-community plan came up, because if it hadn't, I was going to bring it up. In fact, I brought one. It's big, it's big. And I really encourage everyone in this room, if you haven't read it or read parts of it. It's available on the Township website, and it's a wonderful document. It was first created back in 1989 and then updated in 2003 and 2004, and most recently updated this year. In fact, the Township Board unanimously passed this revised version of the community plan. Every one of the members of the board voted for it. When I was reading it, some things struck me and jumped off the page, and I thought, well, this is in the plan and everyone's voted for it. Why don't we hear more about potentially enacting these things? It talks in more than one place about establishing a joint planning committee, which could include the Harbor Authority, so that it should be a priority for community and economic development. It actually says in here that public acquisition of the Denison property is the top priority of the tri-communities. I don't hear that talked about from that point of view. And then this one, which I touched on earlier, it's in here, quote, improve the appearance of the entrances into the township through landscape design, signs, and land development. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's a fabulous document. The people that worked on it, some were planning commissioners, some were elected officials, others were volunteers. And I know they had many, many long, arduous meetings, crossing T's and dotting I's. I was at some of them, and I applaud their work. I can't name all of them, but they know who they are. I think we're so fortunate that the three communities actually have a tri-community master plan. It goes back to what I said before about when we work together, look at the great stuff we can achieve with regional cooperation. I would just like to see us kind of honor it more and implement it more. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, I'm Alan Walbrink. I'm a resident of Saugatuck Township, and my question has to do with my interest in what party affiliation has to do with local politics, like the supervisorship. So I'd like to hear from John Helmerich why he affiliates with his party and how he thinks that might influence his performance on the job, and ask the same thing in Jonathan Phillips. Thanks.
And we begin with John.
Well, I forget what, oh.
Yes, we begin with John.
I forget which wise man or woman first said it, but all politics is local. First of all, clarification, it's state law that in townships that there's party affiliation. Cities can choose to be nonpartisan, most of them do. Townships do not have that option. You can run as an independent, but you're encouraged this should be a Republican and a Democrat. As to me personally, when I first moved here, it seemed like there was always a Democrat or two, maybe not two, but there always was one on the township board. I even thought at one point, well, gee, maybe they save a seat for a Democrat. Some great people held that role, Damian Jarzembowski, Jim Hansen. So that's one point. I'd like to see more Democrats running. I am a Democrat. I mean, that's who I am. And do I think the party politics actually play a role? No, not really. It's an affiliation. It's the structure. It's the way. Yeah. Where it does play an important role, though, is the issue of straight ticket voting. So I want to remind everyone in this room, the Supreme Court upheld Michigan's straight ticket voting law, and that means you can vote, so be it, if you're inclined, you can vote straight Republican, but you can still go to the township supervisor race and fill in the circle next to my name. That does not invalidate your ballot. You're allowed to do that. You can do it in more than one race. It's an important message about straight ticket voting. Was there more? I can't think if there was more to that question. I think I answered it. Why we're affiliated. I'm affiliated, and again, but I don't think it's a driving factor in how we work together. I mean, I actually was raised a Republican. I was appointed page to Congress by a Republican congressman when I was a senior in high school. And then I went to work for the guy that beat him when I went to college in Washington, and he was beat by a Democrat, a guy named Jim Blanchard, who went on to be governor of Michigan for 2 terms. So I've always been one of these people that we have less of nowadays that works across the aisle and thinks we should all work together. Thank you.
Jonathan?
Holy cow, what a story.
It's true.
No, it has nothing to do with it. Really, in local politics, party affiliation has nothing. Is John correct? Yes, we do have to choose. Unfortunately, it's the way it's set up. As far as the decision-making process for what goes on roads, streets, lights, water, no, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It's a shame that the ballot is set up the way it is, I'll be honest with you. I think it doesn't matter. I think it should just be people's names down a list, and you just check the box.
Other questions from the audience?
I'd just like to touch on a point that John brought up when he was talking about the master plan, and brought up it's actually the McClendon property, not the Dennison property. It was probably one of our darker days in the township when we were several years back having this discussion, which really divided the township greatly, cost the township dearly in about $500,000 of taxpayer money as we were discussing what was going to happen to this property, and legally what were the rights of the property owner and what were the interests and zoning issues, you know, that the township wanted to see happen. The township is now under a court-approved consent agreement as far as that property goes, and it runs with the land. The owner, Mr. McClendon, is no longer with us. The estate must sell the property. There is going to be a new owner coming along for that property, and with that new ownership, quite possibly, that owner is going to be coming before the township again to move forward with some kind of a development plan in that property. My question is that as township supervisor, how can we avoid what happened last time around with this, where it became so divisive and so expensive, and how can we move forward respecting the property rights, but also respecting the interests of that land?
We begin with Jonathan.
We put ordinances in place. We put zoning laws in place. They have to present a plan. When they present that plan, we have to review it. And as long as the plan meets the ordinances and the zoning laws as they are written, the person has a right to build whatever they want on that property. That's pretty much what it is, in a nutshell. Yes, there's a tri-community plan, but that tri-community plan is a guideline. That property owner still has rights, whoever owns it.
And I used the word Dennison because I was quoting actually from the plan. So I'm very aware of the current ownership of that property. So on one hand, I think we all agree, I hope we as a community and as a board have moved beyond the divisiveness and the issues that came up in the past. If I were to become the new supervisor, once a sale happens, whether it's to one person or if any of the land is parceled out, doesn't matter. I'd want to meet with that person. I'm not sure if Bill Wester ever met Aubrey McClendon. I heard that Mr. McClendon didn't often visit here where he would meet with local people. I would expect an owner to give the township board and supervisor that courtesy. I'd want to sit down and talk with them and find out what they're thinking about and maybe give them some ideas. There are things that can be shared. When you look at the vastness, what is it, 396 acres of the North Dennison, a lot of that property is, you know, the flatlands that runs up to Blue Star Highway. Maybe we talk to a new owner. Another point of the tri-community plan is we should have a tri-community community center for activities for people of all ages. We don't have anything like that. Maybe that's where we build it. So again, I think the bottom line is talking to people, sharing ideas, and not putting up walls and saying, you can only talk to my representative, or you changed your zoning before you said you did, or after you said you did. And another point too, though, it's very clear that townships and planning commissions, they do have the right to kind of state what they'd like a property to be. It's not just a question of we're zoning this is retail, or this is agricultural, or this is mixed use. They could say, we'd like mixed use in this area on Blue Star Highway, and we'd really like it if it included X, Y, and Z. That's not stepping over the line. I mean, I think that's what smart planning commissions do. There's a whole concept called form-based code that I'm sure you're aware of, and the townships never followed that, but they could. And it's not done to stop or prevent something. It's to work with people on what your vision collectively might be.
We have time for one last question. I'm sorry, we don't. I'm just getting the signal.
That was fast.
So, yeah, hey, the boss said no. Okay. Well, we thank you very much. Your questions have been very well stated, and certainly you've heard the candidates' opinions speaking to those questions. We are a League of Women Voters, and we encourage you to stick around for the next segment, where we will be having a candidate forum on Saugatuck Township Council members and City Council members. And otherwise, we would ask that you vote on November 8th. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they do get to speak. It was a good wrap-up, though, wasn't it? No. Okay, I won't do it again, okay? So it's a prelude to their closing remarks. Thank you very much. Go for it, Jonathan.
I would like to thank the people of Saugatuck for the opportunity to serve you the last 4 years. I feel with your support, we can make the next upcoming 4 years something special. So I ask you again to put your faith in me and vote for John Phillips on November 8th. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here and for those that have been showing their support for my campaign. I think you understand that I'm doing it out of a real desire to help and offer what I can to make everything in our quality of life better here in the township. In the last 12 years, I've served on several local boards and committees, including the Saugatuck Douglas Historical Society, committees for the Saugatuck Center for the Arts. I've mentored at the high school. I mentioned my involvement with the My Place initiative. I like to be involved. I like to provide what I can in terms of getting something done. And I know I can do more for the township. I did just want to note, I'm a Michigan resident, born and raised outside Detroit. Yes, senior year in high school, I went off to Washington, D.C., and then I got a TV career that took me to New York and Los Angeles. But Steve and I chose to come back to Michigan 12 years ago, and many people in this room were not born here, did not grow up here. And I've got roots here. My parents first moved to Saugatuck in 1989. That's almost 30 years ago. We visited a lot over the time. And we're very fortunate to move here when my mother, who was then widowed, but we had 8 wonderful years having her nearby and close and an integral part of our life after having been separated for so long. So again, like I said, I really want to bring whatever I can, go back to my points, leadership, vision, experience. I know there's more that we can do together, and we can do things to make things better, and one step would be to help me join the board of Saugatuck Township as its new supervisor in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.